Hello, this is Mike Van Meter, and welcome to the Recovery is Possible podcast. I want to thank you for joining me. You can reach us at our Facebook site, which is also called Recovery is Possible, or our website, which is vanmeterwellnesssolutions.com. This podcast exists to educate the public about addiction, remove the stigma associated with addiction, and offer help and support to those suffering from addiction. And today we will be talking about the McShin Foundation. And today we have with us Jesse Wysocki, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the McShin Foundation, and they are located in Richmond, Virginia. So, Jesse, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Oh, well, so Jesse, if you can tell us about the McShin Foundation, maybe a little bit about the background, how you guys got started, and what exactly is it that you guys do?
Yeah, definitely. So we started in 2005, and John Shinholzer, who's our president and co-founder, and his wife Carol McDade, they pretty much started out with just recovery houses, and basically trying to help people trying to get into recovery or people in recovery have a safe place to live. And from there it's grown. Now we have what's called an RCO, which is a recovery community organization. We actually rent the whole west wing of a church right in Richmond. And, in the church, we have groups. The groups are open to the public. We have 12-step meetings that meet here. And then also our participants who live in our housing come up here, whether it's to meet with their recovery coach or to come to a group or to a 12-step meeting. They have access to that 7 days a week. And then we have a 28-day program where someone that's battling substance use might need some help, and they'll come in and they'll come into our program for 28 days, and from there transition to one of our step-up houses. So our main goal, we're a resource center, and again, it's grown over the years. I took this position 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. I've been in this position, and I've watched McShin over the years, just from myself being in recovery. I've worked at a couple different places, in the recovery realm of things, and in the healthcare side of things, and just being in recovery, I've been fortunate to watch McShin and watch how they've grown over the years, and then now I've been able to be a part of it, and we continue to grow, but that's kind of the basis of our program and how it started. Carol McDade, she's a lobbyist in DC. She lobbies for people in recovery all the time. She's out there trying to get better laws to help us, and John, he the same thing. He's out there nationally trying to do the same thing. And then we have a CEO, Honesty Liller, and her and I kind of work hand in hand with the operations of McShin.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you guys do a lot of fantastic work here. I would say Virginia, but I actually think it goes around the country. And Jesse, I'm going to tell the audience how I came across you guys initially, if you don't mind. So many of you in the audience know that I'm a retired FBI agent, and one of my duties as an FBI agent was I was an instructor at the academy. And at the academy, we have two programs. Obviously, we have the employees, the FBI agents and analysts, but then we also have a leadership program for police executives from around the world. It's not just the U.S., but around the world. And one of the courses that I taught in that program was a course called Officer Involved Shootings, which dealt with helping officers in critical incidents, not just shootings, but any critical incident they may be in. And it dealt with programs, policies, procedures of what to do when officers were involved in these critical incidents. And one of the things that the officers kept talking about was, hey, we do a pretty good job at helping people with a critical incident, but what we don't do is help them long-term when they develop, alcohol, prescription drug abuse problems, which is usually the result of an incident, or the family's long-term. Okay. And we ended up developing a course called Leading At-Risk Employees, which is still taught down there to this day, even after I retired and left the academy. And that dealt with, so what do you do with officers and their families after long-term, with those problems. And when I first developed the course, the first time I taught it, it was actually the very first time I taught it, I was taught to not talk about my own recovery. And that's what I believed at the time. And I was teaching the course. And after one of the first classes, some of the officers came up to me and asked me if I was in recovery, because it seemed that I was in recovery the way that I talked about it. And I told them that I was, and they asked me why I was not telling the class about that. And again, it was because of my conditioning, what I've been told in 12-step meetings. So what happened was I talked to everybody in my circle, everybody that in my world was telling me not to, not to talk about my recovery. And so I had these officers come up to me and ask me about it. And I asked everybody in my program about whether or not I should disclose my identity. And they had said no. And again, I was trying to honor what are known as the spiritual principles of the program. And I went home and I talked to my wife about it. And she said that, look, I don't have an answer for you. That was her belief as well. And as I was going to bed that night, Jesse, what happened was I was flipping through the channels on the television and I came across a documentary called Anonymous People. And I've talked about that many times on this podcast before, this program, Anonymous People. And it changed my whole world outlook. And in the documentary, if you've not seen it, it talks about how people that are in recovery should be proud of being in recovery, and that we need people, people on the front lines, an army, if you will, of people going out and talking about the recovery and promoting recovery. That way people know where to go. And one of the people that were covered in this documentary was John Shinholzer and his wife, and Carol McDade, and they were featured in the documentary, and they talked about the McShin Foundation and the work that they are doing in Virginia, the jail prison system, and advocating for people in recovery. And it really touched my heart. And I actually went down about 3 or 4 years ago, met John at one of your fundraising events, and got to know those folks there as well. So you guys were featured in Anonymous People, and they talked about the work that you were doing. And so kind of ironic how those fates came together.
Yeah. I listening to that story, what's funny for me, or kind of ironic for me, is when I took this position here at McShin, that was one of the things that I initially struggled with, was that piece of because I'm grounded in 12-step, and I was taught the same things you were taught. So it wasn't something that we were out in the public, like letting people know. And when I came to McShin, it was totally different. Like it was basically almost a requirement, to let people know you're in recovery. And we had to, me personally, I had to change some of the language that I use, and I had watched the movie, The Anonymous People, when it first came out. There was this big screening we did here in the Richmond area, and I watched it. But again, I just was so rooted in what was taught to me in the 12-step fellowship, and I confused that with my recovery, my personal recovery. So I could definitely relate to that, because that was like a learning curve for me in this position. Now I'm all for people. That's the stigma that comes with this illness. It's stigmatized, so people think you're not allowed to talk about it. Don't say you have it. Don't say you suffer from addiction. So I definitely can relate to that. It's funny.
Yeah, and I want to be clear with people that when you're talking about 12-step programs in particular, and this is true of all recovery programs, that your anonymity is up to you. And that's what I really took away from the video, is nobody's telling you that you have to go out and tell everybody that in your recovery. Recovery meetings are designed to be a safe place. It's for you to come to get well. And what I learned in that movie, and actually the movie really talked about that, the documentary talked about it, is that I am free to talk about my recovery all day long. I'm free to do that. Now, what I'm not free to do is talk about you and your recovery. That's a decision for you to make. But, exactly. For me to do it, now, if you're comfortable in doing it, the problem is that people have been conditioned in 12-step programs to never talk about it under any circumstances. And when I went back and I looked at the history of AA and Bill Wilson in the early days, I found that that's actually not true. That was never in the intent. Bill Wilson and Bob Smith always wanted AA, for example, to be a safe place for people. And that meant that we would never disclose somebody that came, because, we always want this to be a safe place for the newcomer. We want people to be safe. And I found in the early days of my recovery, Jesse, that, for example, I was looking for law enforcement specific meetings. And if the listeners today aren't familiar with the programs that are out there, there are different meetings for different people, men, women, only meetings, professional meetings, gay meetings, young people's meetings, on and on. And there's a meeting for almost every group you can imagine. And so I was early on looking for law enforcement meetings. And those meetings, Jesse, were so secretive that it took me over a year to find one. And when I finally did, I even told the guys, I said, you guys are so secretive that I couldn't find you. And I thought to myself, well, what's the point? If I can't find you, if I can't find where to get well, what's the point in that? And so it just seemed excessive to me, and that's why that video really changed kind of my outlook on that whole thing, and I'm a bit more open now. Have you ever run into that?
Yeah, definitely. And again, it seems like, and I get it to an extent, but like, it's just so much stigma with that. Like, why does it have to be a secret? Like, why do we have to be ashamed that we're in recovery? And that's what I've learned over the years, is I don't have to be ashamed anymore. Yes, I suffer from an illness, but there's something I can do about it, and I continue to do about it. Something also that I've learned over time is I don't represent the 12-step fellowship that I attend.
No,
I'm not a representative of that. I'm a representative of my recovery, and that gives me, that fortitudes me the chance to speak about it and to be open. And I think it's so important, because like what you're talking about, the more people do that, the more there's an outlet for people coming behind us. The more that they know, actually, there is a way, there is some hope, there is help, whether it's somebody that's a nurse that suffers from substance use, or a law enforcement officer, or just, somebody with a regular job working at a fast food place or something. They're able to find hope and reach out. But when we, like you said, and when we keep it closed and hidden and nobody knows about it, then it's hard for people to find that help. But I just think that just plays so much into the stigma of the illness that we suffer from.
Yeah, and that's something that we are really working to combat, because, if you had cancer, you wouldn't go into hiding. If you had diabetes, you wouldn't go into hiding. If you have an allergy, you don't go into hiding. I mean, it's only with addiction that people go into hiding. And I'll tell you something, Jesse, the more and more I learn about addiction, and I am back in school getting a formal education through Hazelden Betty Ford right now, and the more and more I get into the science of this, it truly is a disease. It's a disease of the body and the mind, and it is something that people are genetically predisposed towards. And once this addiction kicks off, it's something that you have no control over, and much of it has to do with your physiology. Now, you wouldn't be embarrassed by any other physiological issue that you had. It's only with addiction that we seem to have this stigma, and it's something that you should not be ashamed of. And if you're listening to us right now, if you're listening to Jesse and I, and you need to be in recovery, that's something that's important to understand. It is nothing to be ashamed of. I've done a lot of things in my life, and Jesse, I know you've done a lot of things in your life, but I will tell you, the one single thing that I am most proud of, and was the most difficult thing I ever did in my life, was get into recovery. So it's something to be proud of. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I agree 100% with it. I teach here at McShin. I teach a couple different trainings that we do. We have a McShin Leadership and Recovery Coach training, and then we also do the state peer recovery specialist training. And I'm a trainer for both of them. And something that I talk about in both of those classes, the trainings, both of those trainings is the history, the history of addiction and how long it's been stigmatized. there's a doctor, I think Dr. Benjamin Rush, and I think it's over 50 years ago, 50 plus years, where he went out, and he made it a public thing, with his colleagues that, look, this is an illness. This is a disease. It's a legitimate illness. And then the DSM-5 came out and deemed it an illness. And we still to this day have people that don't agree with it, people that think it needs to be hidden, people that don't want to help with it, thinking that it's a choice, and it's just crazy. 50 plus years ago that there was doctors talking about this, and society still struggles with it. And all that does is play into and I teach this in the trainings that we do here at the McShin Foundation, the history of substance use and the history of addiction. And it's 50 plus years, doctors were deeming this an illness, deeming this a legit disease, and still society struggles with it. And like we were talking about earlier, that just plays into the fact it makes it harder for people that are new seeking help. It makes them shame, they're ashamed. They don't want to ask for help because they think that there's morally something wrong with them. And when the truth is, and this is an illness, it's an allergy. It's when we put a substance in us, we have allergic reaction.
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. And the difference between this illness and other illnesses is that this one actually has something that you can do about it. And that is by not using, meaning complete abstinence, then you can put this disease into remission. And we know with 100% certainty, if you do not pick up a drink or a drug, that you will not start that progression or the obsession to continue to drink or drug. Because if you're in the audience and you've not heard this phrase before, it's not the 100th drink that kills you. It's the first one that kills you, because then you start that obsession all over again. And what we have to learn to do is to not pick up the first time. So and I'm sure that's what you guys teach down there at McShin.
Yeah. I mean, and you're right, man. Once you pick up, once you put one in you, and usually all bets are off. And we teach that, when we try to stay. Not try. We're open to every pathway. So I don't want to, definitely, don't pick up. But there's pathway. There's MAT. MAT is a pathway. So people have used that, but I think that the best way to make other programs like that work is to combine it, with people in recovery. Like, they got to be surrounded by people in recovery. And that's the approach that McShin puts out. And that's the approach that we take is, look, stay in the herd, stay involved, stay around people that are in recovery. If you're on maintenance, whether that's Suboxone, methadone, Vivitrol shot, whatever it is, if you're on that stuff, or if you're taking psych meds for your mental health disorder, whatever it may be, you need to still stay involved with people in recovery, stay in the mix. Because when you get out of the mix, that's when you become, I don't want to say weak, but you just become susceptible to picking back up. And that plays into the part why it's so important, for us to, individually, I'm in recovery and I can help people. When we hide that, it makes it harder for other people to get help.
Yeah, and then it becomes a bit selfish in a lot of ways if you're only working on your own recovery and you're not helping other people. And then we know also that by helping other people, we do help ourselves, whether they ever get well or not. I mean, that's something that we know. And there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of empirical and evidence and studies that have demonstrated exactly what you said works. And that is that you must surround yourself with people that are like-minded and are in the same situation that you're in and you can relate to. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that, and you're absolutely correct. And as you mentioned also, if you're on one of those maintenance drugs or those drugs that are helping you either psychologically or It's something that is helping you wean off of a drug. For example, you mentioned methadone, which you'd be taking if you're coming off of heroin. That it's important that you be in recovery circles, because that's as you're transitioning, and hopefully you can get to the point where you're not using at all. But it will help you if you're surrounded with people who are in recovery and will get you in that mindset. So I'm sure you run into that down there as well.
Yeah, we do. We because we're here at the McShin Foundation, our recovery center, our recovery houses, and in our program, we're open to any. So here at McShin, we're open to any pathway, and it's something that we try to stay open, and not exclude anyone. But in the process of doing that, people struggle with that. If they come in and they're on a maintenance drug, they feel like they might be shunned or looked at differently. Or if people come in here and they don't quite click in a 12-step fellowship, they think they might be looked at differently. So I think that's one of the best things that this center here, the McShin Foundation, our center has to offer is it's just open to anybody seeking recovery. You don't got to bring a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. You don't have to have a basic text. Granted, we got all that literature and we'll give it to you. You don't have to have a Bible. You don't have to have any of these things. It's just come here, be around people that are just not trying to use drugs and alcohol anymore.
So now, are you located in Richmond? Do you have locations other than Richmond?
So our center it's actually in Lakeside, which is just like a surrounding county of Richmond. It's 2300 Dunbar Road. And then our houses, we have a bunch of recovery houses. They're located in, let me cut my other phone off. Sorry. They're located in the surrounding counties, 11 different houses, in Richmond and Henrico. But as far as our center, we only have one center, but we do have 2 jail programs. So we're in and out of jails, which is something that's pretty cool. We have a jail program here locally. It's just kind of getting started back up because, due to COVID-19, a lot of restrictions have been going on in the jail.
Oh, sure,
so that kind of messed with our programs there. But we were very fortunate we got a federally funded grant through SAMHSA, and it allowed us to operate in 2 jails and provide programs for returning citizens from the jails. So we have one that's in the mountains here in Virginia, and then we have one that's locally here. And so if they go through our program in the jail, then they can petition or apply for a scholarship. And if they get approved, then they get awarded a scholarship in our 28-day program, which it's an intensive program, which can cost anywhere upward to $9,800 for the intensive program, and they'll get a full free scholarship into the program. So it's pretty cool. So we have that there, but our one center is here in Richmond in Henrico.
Okay, and usually how many people can you house at one time?
So full capacity, if all our houses are full, it'll be 124. And right now our women's house, all our women's houses, our women's program and our women's houses are full. Our men's houses, we have a few open beds. I think we have right now, total number is 111, I think.
And okay, and that's even with COVID-19, you're at near full capacity.
Oh yeah. I mean, COVID-19 didn't really. I mean, it made it harder on us as an organization to operate, financially, mm-hmm. and time wise, and just the things that we had to do to protect the participants and our staff. It made it a lot harder, and that means, but the illness it shot up. We had way more people getting released from jail, looking for help, getting released from prison. People off the streets needing help, and overdoses spiked. I think it's been a 40% increase. I know here in Virginia, it's probably gonna be a record this year for the amount of overdoses that have happened.
Wow. And let me ask you, do you think that that's due to the program with COVID-19 obviously has shut just about everything down to include recovery meetings and people's ability to seek help and plus isolation. How do you think that contributed to these overdoses and issues that you're having?
Oh, it definitely played a part. We talk about it here at McShin all the time, connectivity, being connected, being in the herd, being amongst people in recovery. And if you're not able to do that, it can definitely the illness, because this illness, man, it's it's a beast. I guess the best word to describe it. It's it attacks you physically, it attacks you spiritually, it attacks you mentally. So mentally, if you're not surrounded around people in recovery and you're not able to get that connection by whether it's going to church, because some people get it going to church, some people get it going to 12-step meetings, some people get it coming right up here to the center, and if you're not able to get that connection, and be around other people, that leaves you up to your own demise. You get in your head and next thing you know, you're out picking a substance up and then, unfortunately death is what happens a lot of times when we relapse and we pick back up. So it's definitely played a role in it, and it's made it harder for all kinds of organizations to operate. We have a lot of, the Richmond area and surrounding counties here in Richmond, very fortunate. We have a lot of organizations around here, and it's affected a lot of the organizations. It's, whether participants have contracted COVID-19 and they've had to shut the organization down or limited their intakes. Our staff had to get laid off. The financial cost of buying PPE and getting the equipment needed to keep things running. So all that plays a part in it, and then we get caught up in all that, and we quickly lose the time and the management that's needed to help the actual individual that's suffering from substance use, because they're seeking help. They have not, the doors have not stopped being knocked on here at McShin. Like, people are constantly seeking help, and a lot of times, financially they have no means, and it can be due to COVID, loss of job or whatever it may be. So it makes it even harder.
Yeah. And let me be clear about that. You said that in the state of Virginia, where we are, Commonwealth of Virginia, you're looking at a 40% increase in overdoses.
Yeah. I think that was the last number that I was given I was on this conference call, and I think they were saying it's upward. It's going to be upward to like a 40% increase. We do what's called a revive training here, and the revive training basically is naloxone training, and that's how to administer naloxone in case of an overdose. And so I'm a trainer for that, and we'll do it here once a month. It's open to the public and to our participants and our staff, and I get on these conference calls in regards to it. And I think that was the last information I heard.
Wow. And that's something that is not talked about in the public is, we talk about the issues that COVID-19 and all these shutdowns has caused, but I've not heard in the open media a statistic like you just threw out. That's pretty shocking to me. But it just shows you the seriousness of this, and the seriousness of how important it is to get help, to get out and work with people in organizations like the McShin Foundation. It just really it shows the importance of the work and what a vital asset you are to the community.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It is. It's incredible. It's so unfortunate too. The amount of deaths that we've seen. We had a grand opening this year of a memorial garden, and that was to recognize not just overdoses, but anybody who's passed away as a direct result of substance use disorder. Because, a lot of times people just think it's just overdoses, but, many things happen that cause death behind substance use. And we opened this memorial garden, and it's beautiful. A beautiful memorial garden. It was a great grand opening, but it's almost like a it's a sad moment with a good moment of open. It was a good grand opening, but it was so sad that it's a grand opening to recognize, deaths from this illness. And, as beautiful as the Memorial Garden looked, like the bricks that we put in there, there's names on each brick of somebody that's passed away from a direct result of substance use.
Oh, I didn't know that you guys were doing that. And that's a tremendous thing to do. It really is. And I wonder if more cities and more jurisdictions put up a memorial like that, it would really highlight what a deadly disease this is. Because I had no idea that you guys were doing that. So what other things are you looking at? And I know that COVID has really affected a lot of planning for a lot of different organizations, but kind of looking to the future, what kinds of things do you all have in the works?
So we had the ribbon cutting for the Memorial Garden, and that's up and running. People can come in anytime, take a look at it, and they can also purchase a brick if they wanted to. If they had somebody close and they lost, they can do that as well. And we've always traditionally had our men and women combined, and they're still combined. We're still co-ed. But we have two programs, two 28-day programs. They're both the same, but the men have their program and the women have their program. And what we recently did is we moved the women to one of our houses, which is located in probably about, I guess you could say 20, 25 minutes from our center, from our main center. And it's in Chesterfield County now. And so they're there. And they have actually their own little meeting room. It's almost like a little mini RCO. So it's pretty cool. And that's been one of our main focuses this year, is getting their center, and that's the offices and the meeting room, up and running. And we're in the process. They got a little mini gym in there, which is cool. We're in the process of finishing that up. Once the gym's finished, everything will be up and running there. So that's been one of the main focuses, and it's been pretty cool to see that unwind and how much it's been appreciated by the women in our program. Now they have their separate program there, and they do their groups together. We have facilitators come and do the groups there, and then it's actually located on a lot of land. We used to have horses out there. We're getting ready to put some chickens and some different animals there, and that'll kind of incorporate into their program. So part of the 28 days is, they'll tend to the chickens. They'll have their groups in the meeting room. They'll have their gym there. So that's been a pretty good move this year. And then we do a lot of trainings, and it's fortunate. I love it. I love the fact that we're out training. Sometimes it gets a little hectic for me personally. I'm a little. Yeah. This is like a little selfish thing for me. Like I'm usually the one that's doing all the trainings. So when I do them, it takes away from my regular duties of, handling the operations. So a lot of times I come back after a 8-day training, and like I got like 150 emails to answer and a bunch of different corrective actions or things going on. And so it can put me behind a little bit, but I love it. And something that we're doing now is we've just recently partnered with the Department of Corrections. And I think they got a grant. I'm not sure, but they're paying for their staff, which is pretty cool. They got their staff, which is like the COs that work in the prisons, and the cognitive behavior counselors. They're going to come do the peer recovery specialist training that I conduct here at McShin. And so, that's something we're doing. And I think the plan is to continue that through next year as well. So, those are some things we got on the horizon.
And that's fantastic, because I will tell you that in my entire law enforcement career, I was a corrections officer, then I was a police officer, and then I was an FBI agent. And never once in all of that time did I receive any of the training that you're talking about. So I think it's fantastic that those officers are receiving that, because it's really, there's a lot of things that I know about addiction now that I sure wish I had known when I was in that profession. Yeah.
I agree, man. I think it's really cool. And I'm a product of the Department of Corrections, so on the side you were on. My disease brought me, in front of a judge, and the judge ended up giving me a few years in prison, and I went and did my time, and I came home, and I would do typically what a lot of us do when we get caught up in the system, and especially if we suffer from addiction, is I kept violating probation with a dirty urine, or with not following my probation officer's rules or whatever it may be. And this was years ago. I have I'm coming up on 9 years in recovery now.
Awesome.
But like it was a revolving door for me. So I did some time in prison. I came home, violated, did some more time in prison, and I kept doing it. So like I have I know what it's like in there. So it gives a higher meaning. I don't know. It makes, it to me, to see the Department of Corrections moving this way, and doing the things they're doing, as far, like you said, when you were an officer, when you were a correctional officer and at the FBI and a police officer, like, these trainings weren't offered, it's probably unheard of. So it's pretty cool to see the state here, do that. Say, hey, let's get our COs trained on this. Let's get them trained as a peer recovery specialist, a recovery coach, and hopefully they'll continue to do it, and they'll continue to allow the inmates, well, I think it's called offenders now, but allow the offenders to take the training as well, because it's definitely beneficial to learn about this stuff. And what better way to try to combat this illness than learn these trainings.
And Jesse, I'm going to go a step further and say, we can't forget that the training is important for the officers themselves, not just the offenders, but the officers. Law enforcement is a very toxic job. And I'll tell you I'm one of the few people that has worked in law enforcement pretty much at every level, from corrections all the way up to the federal level. And I will hands down tell you that the most difficult law enforcement job I ever had was being a corrections officer. That by far was the toughest. I mean, they're all tough in their own way, but in different ways. But the one that was the most toxic on me personally was being a corrections officer. And my hat's off to you. If you're a corrections officer out there and you're listening to this right now, I'm telling you, my hat is off to you. That is a tough job. And we can't forget that the people in the law enforcement business need to hear this message just as much as everybody else. That's a hard profession. The suicide rate, the addiction rate in law enforcement is very high as well. So the message that you're putting out, it's not just for the offenders, but for the people that work there, the staff that are in these facilities as well. So it's an important message.
Yeah, definitely. And when I think about police officers and law enforcement and correctional officers, it's almost like, to me, it's even harder for them to kind of come out about what's going on. They don't want people to know, that they have this type of illness. So it's definitely a hurdle for them to even come out and be open about it. So that's what makes it so much more valuable for this trainings to happen.
Yeah. So maybe just a little plug there for the future as to what McShin will do. Maybe that's a service that you guys can provide. Yeah, I'm here. Look at this. We're giving you guys ideas right here on the air. So that's. I mean, but it is important, and that was, I mentioned to you teaching at the FBI National Academy, and again, the audience that I was talking to were chiefs, sheriffs, or command staff level officers. And I used to actually, all joking aside, I used to hear from these guys all the time. They said, Mike, it's great that you're telling us that, the executives this, but our officers, when they are in training in the beginning of they don't need to hear this at the end. Most of the students I had were at the end of their career. And they would tell me, Mike, people need to hear this at the beginning of the career, so they can look for, the warning signs. Because, Jesse, that's what happened to me. The job over the years, and then put on my military time on top of that, it just takes its toll on you. And you mentioned spiritually, emotionally, physically, all of the above. It just takes its toll on you. And nowhere in my career did anybody sit down and talk to me about my wellness. It's funny, and I used to talk about this, that we spend a lot of time in law enforcement and the military talking about arrests, arrest warrants, shooting, defensive tactics, writing reports, all the different things that you need to do in a law enforcement career. But the one piece of training that we did not receive was, Jesse? The one thing I did not receive?
Probably training on addiction, training on substance use.
And how to protect yourself. Now, we will always talk about the offenders. Everything is geared towards the job, but nobody ever sat down and said, "Hey, but here's what you need to do to take care of you." That never happened.
Self-care. Yep.
That's right.
Self-care. And it's so, it's so important. We'll do that. We train. We have monthly trainings with the staff here, and in the recovery coach training and in the peer recovery specialist training, it's a very big part of it where it's, look, you're going to be giving, and I tell this in my training all the time. I talk to, because when you decide to get in this field, and even as a law in the law enforcement field, you're in a field of giving, like you're giving your time. You're supposed to, yes, protect and serve, and you got to worry about the community and that kind of thing, and the individuals in the community. And here as in this recovery realm of things, you want to protect, you want to make sure the participant is okay, you want to make sure they're getting help. And while you're doing that, you're giving so much of you forget about where you can receive something for you, because that's all day long. That's what you do all day long, is give your time. Your time is being given to someone else. And then how do I take care of me? And that's a big piece in these trainings. We talk about self-care is so important. If you don't take care of yourself, it ends up affecting you on the job. It'll affect you. It probably shows in law enforcement. It affects the officers if they don't take care of themselves. And definitely here at McShin, we hound our staff, look, self-care, take some days, work on you, and here's some trainings on how to do it, because we know if you're not taking care of you and the illness that you suffer from, you're going to be no good to somebody else.
And you may find that illness rears its ugly head again. I mean, that's if you don't take care of yourself, I mean, particularly if you're in recovery, then you're setting yourself up for a relapse yourself. And you got to be careful with that. So that's important. It's, protecting the people around you. And, a lot of the things that, we see, happen, whether it's anger, whether it's misuse of force, and I'm talking about law enforcement here, and those issues, if you went and you did sort of a meta study of some of the issues that go on in law enforcement, some of the things that we're seeing in the press today, I wonder just how much of that could be mitigated if people were heavily involved in self-care programs. Those are things to look at, and we need to do more of this. And there aren't enough people out there doing this type of work. But that's one of the things I've always liked about the McShin Foundation, is that you guys are out in front. You are going into the jails. You are going into the prisons. You are going out and talking to these folks. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's something I love about what we do. That's for sure. Because I sat in those seats at one time. So being able to go in there and teach and try to help, whether it's a correctional officer or a offender, I love it.
Well, absolutely. So how can people get hold of the McShin Foundation if they have any questions, want to contribute or help you, or are just interested in your program? Give us some of the ways that they can get hold of you.
There's a few different ways. We have our website, McShin.org. You can definitely go through our website if you're interested in donating or volunteering. And then you also can just call in. One thing I hound our team about is we're a resource center, so we want to answer the phones 7 days a week, and typically the phone don't stop ringing. We have our phones forwarded to a cell phone at night. Somebody's answering it with questions, so we're a resource center, so you can always call in, and then the number is 804-249-1845, and you always can call in, ask questions, get help. And then, our website is definitely an area where if you want to just do some research, see what we're about, see what we have, or if you're looking to, again, donate time or money, you can do it through the website as well. But I encourage, one thing I encourage is if you don't know about McShin, or if you do know about McShin and you might have heard something and you want to check it out, because people always hear different things. It might be true, it might not be true. Just come up here, just see us in action. Come up to the center. You don't got to plan your tour. You just walk in and you can ask for me, Jesse Wysocki, and I'll show you around and show you what we do.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And I do encourage listeners to reach out and explore what the program is all about, and give them a call, look at the website, and contribute if you can. If that's something that you can do, support them in any way that you felt led to do. And so, Jesse, with that, I really appreciate your time today. Appreciate you talking to us. And can you give your phone number one more time?
Yeah. And thank you for having me. I'm honored to be on here. Hopefully you'll get me famous. So, but the number to call in, it's 804-249-1845. That's our office line. Call into that number. And somebody will help you. And you can definitely ask for me if you have any issues when you call in.
Absolutely. And so if you're listening to this podcast and you do need help, if you're someone that needs, you're just struggling with addiction right now, whether it's drugs or alcohol or any other addiction that we haven't even talked about, gambling, gaming, sex issues, all those types of things, please get help. There is help out there. Please reach out, take that first step, get the help that you can, reach out to McShin or to any other organization. We do have people in Europe that are listening, people from around the world, actually, that are listening to this. And wherever you are, there's somebody in your community that can help you out. You just have to take that step to reach out to them. And so, as always, I'd like to say I don't represent, and Jason doesn't represent any group. He mentioned that before. We're open to all ways of getting well. I don't represent anyone other than myself. My only purpose in giving this information is to share with you what I've done, because it's helped me and maybe it will help you too. So if I've said something that does not apply to you, or if you don't agree with it, just discard that, but try to use something that you've heard today. If it's helpful, take that with you and use that if you can. That's what we do in recovery. We help others by helping, help you and we help ourselves by helping you along the way. And with that, just please visit our Facebook page, which is Recovery is Possible, and the website, my website page, which is VanMeterWellnessSolutions.com. Let me know how I'm doing. Give us a follow, give us a like, comments, any topic that you'd like to hear about. I'd just love to have your feedback. So thanks again for joining us today. And Jesse, thank you. And we will talk with you guys soon.